This is not like a threat to Kirk Cousins this year right now, and that's the good thing about it being a third-round pick. I don't think anybody will expect it to be, but I think you're totally right. This is a guy that has starting quarterback pedigree, and to me, after the Big Five, I know Kyle Trask was taken before him. This was, to me, the only guy that left in the draft that had legit big-time starting NFL potential. He needs a little bit system help to kind of do that and get it going. So, yes, that's where he's not special that way. And what I guess I'm basically saying is when you're that type of player this day and age in the NFL, and if your team's not really good around you and you're not making, like, deep playoff runs, then they're always looking to replace you 2 to 3 years down the road. I mean, that's really just life in the NFL right now, unless you're one of the 5-10 special quarterbacks in the league.
Chris Sims and Mike Florio talking about the Vikings, dare I say, quarterback situation now? It's not really a situation for a while.
No,
or is it?
Well, it's something. It's not nothing. I would call it's an incoming storm.
Okay.
Like if you do the forecast on Monday, right? You talk about, well, on Thursday it's going to be this, right? It's not there yet, but you might need to take shelter. There might be chaos on Thursday.
Wow.
It's an incoming quarterback storm.
Wow. There's a 40% chance of backup quarterback showers.
You know
and
what there is? There's a Mond front on the horizon.
There's a 100% chance of that Mond front rolling in for 2022. This is Purple Daily, presented by TCL. Enjoy more of what you love with TCL. And let's get him in here. He is fresh off the big set over the weekend on Pro Football Focus's wonderful coverage of the NFL draft. And he's been a longtime friend of Mackie and Judd and Purple Daily. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. Have you slept at all in like the last 5 days?
Not really. So like we did our podcast, was it Sunday night? And George was wearing like a bro tank top. And I had like a dingy t-shirt, and somebody in the comments, some old guy was like, did you guys just get out of bed? And I was like, in fact, I just did actually. And it was sort of like, but like, I think I tweeted this out, like, Thursday I did some, of my normal work, and then I wanted to take like a nap during the day. And of course, like the nap during the draft day is like batting worse than Tim Tebow in AAA, right? Like it just was not going to happen. And then Aaron Rodgers blew the whole thing up.
Yep.
So it was kind of just like a very adrenaline-filled weekend. Hopefully, everybody that bet on the draft made money, because it was somewhat unpredictable, but then predictable in a lot of ways. And I think the most predictable part was the Vikings waiting until round 4 or 5 to take an edge player, and everybody talking about how Andre Patterson was going to turn him into Chris Dolman.
Well, and we'll get to that. We'll get your full breakdown on the Vikings draft. But since we started off with some clips about the people talking about in the media the Vikings quarterback situation, let's play another one here. So when this came out yesterday, I think the initial reaction from people was, well, I mean, it's Trent Dilfer. I mean, like, he's a mediocre quarterback. So what does he know? Well, a couple things on Trent Dilfer before we get his thoughts on Kellen Mond from Colin Cowherd's show yesterday. Number one, Trent Dilfer has been part of the Elite 11 quarterback camp process for a number of years, and so he's been at the ground level of a lot of the top quarterbacks in the country coming through the camp that he's part of for years and years and years. And so he's not just like spewing takes on young quarterbacks. When he has a strong opinion, it's not always right, but when he has a strong opinion, it's something to consider. And if you remember 10 years ago, okay, this is from also at the time from Colin Cowherd's show, which used to be on ESPN Radio. Kevin Seifert wrote this up and grabbed these quotes. Again, 10 years ago. And Trent Dilfer said, very emphatically, Christian Ponder is Elvis Gerbach. He's Elvis Gerbach. Beautiful thrower. He can throw for yards. Did a lot of nice things. But every time it got tough, he melted. Ponder's drop, his arm speed, everything about him, it's one tempo. He has to play at the 7-on-7 tempo. The drop has to be rhythmical. The receivers have to be open. The ball goes one speed. The pocket has to be nice. anytime he's asked to quicken that up or there's people around him, his accuracy is awful. And he basically said he tests off the charts, but Ponder's going to be a bust. And so he was right about that. Dex, let's roll the tape. This is Trent Dilfer and by the way, this is unprompted. This is at the very end of this discussion, if I'm recalling this correctly. And Cowherd is saying goodbye to Trent Dilfer, and Dilfer says, wait, one more thing. Here we go.
Trent Dilfer, Lipscomb Academy head football coach, Nashville, Tennessee. Not many high school programs have George Kittle working out downstairs. That's pretty good.
Let me give you one to go away with. Kellen Mond, Vikings. Watch out in 3 years. That's the sleeper quarterback pick of the draft.
So did he go third round or second? Yeah, third round. Kellen Mond, the kid from Texas A&M. All right, I'm going to hold you to that, Dilfer.
Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, I think Dilfer's being a little harsh on Elvis Gerbach, a guy who started a number of years. I mean, Gerbach had a much better career than Ponder, but you're right. I mean, it's Kellen Mond has some really good data points, and then he has some really bad data points, and I think that is characteristic of a second-round pick. For example, like I tweeted this out when we had Chris Sims on our show, and he was great, and he was talking about sort of when he doesn't necessarily look at the result of the play. He's looking, at, whether he's throwing in the right spot, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of what we're doing at PFF, but I think from a QB's perspective, it was interesting. But Mond was not successful throwing some of the really difficult passes that NFL players would have to throw. So I looked at last season, he threw 57 passes that were outside the hash marks, 10 yards in the air or further, and he only completed 14 of them. Most of the quarterbacks in the class were at least about 50% on those plays. And so whether that's, the fact that he didn't play with any NFL players or, him simply being inaccurate, that's not good. But on the other hand, you're looking at a player this past season in 322 dropbacks, threw the ball away just twice, but only took 8 sacks. And I think a lot of the issue that we have with Kirk Cousins is, it's not that he's not a great thrower. Kirk's an excellent thrower. It's not that, he's not accurate. He's extremely accurate. But a lot of it is sort of those things that don't show up when the fans go through Pro Football Reference and only look at his passer rating. It's the taking sacks too much. It's fumbling too much in the pocket. It's not being able to escape and make plays with your legs and plays break down. Mond's done a great job of that. He only had 8 what we call turnover-worthy plays this year, down from 14 in 2019 and 20 in 2018. His sacks decreased every single year as well. Like, there are some things on the edges there that make Mond extremely good. And if you widen the margin for error for him, which guys like Diggs and Thielen did for Case Keenum, Jefferson did last year, some of those throws outside hash marks can be completed. And what you're not going to get is sort of the 2nd and 19 because Kirk took a sack on a bootleg type plays. So there could be some value there, especially, of course, given what a second rounder is paid relative to what a quarterback like Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford is paid.
So what I like about this pick too is this, because it's not a first round pick. There's not going to be as much. There will be some, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be a ton. There's going to be no pressure on the Vikings and Mond especially to start immediately. Like, Cousins is their guy, which is fine. I mean, say what we will about Kirk, he's their guy. So to backtrack on all the things that you just talked about that are weaknesses, I think you do have the advantage of coaching for a year and of scheming. And so instead of the first round Ponder, right? He's got to play soon. And he just blows up and it's a mess and it never comes back. I think with Mond, you do have somewhat of the luxury, Eric, of time where you can at least get an idea for the bad habits that you can coach out of him during 2021 while Kirk starts.
I think so. And I also think, I've always gotten pushback for saying this, but because the Vikings offensive line has been so terrible, but I think the Vikings do a good job of making life easier on Kirk Cousins. The graphic you were showing at the very beginning where you looked at 2018 and looked at 2019, 2020, the difference between 19 and 20 was the Kubiak offense, lots of play action, lots of plays outside of structure, lots of open players in that sort of middle of the field where almost all quarterbacks do well. And they went ahead and they got some good offensive linemen in the draft, and you hope for some improvement from guys like Bradbury. Like, he might also be in a situation a lot like Dak Prescott in Dallas, where you have a good running game, you have good weapons, and you have an offensive line that's decent, and then you have a scheme that can sort of maximize the talents. Like, we've seen Kirk Cousins' skills in many ways maximize over the past few years, and that's why he is like a yard, 7.1 yards per attempt in 18, when John DeFilippo kind of said, look, you're a $30 million quarterback. We're going to treat you like one. The last 2 years, it's been, no, you're actually just a really overpaid game manager, and we're going to treat you like one. And I think when you sort of merge that with, no, you're a second round pick who needs a lot of help, and we're going to treat you like one, but you're also very talented. Like, I think that could be a nice stew for the Vikings offensively. The obvious issue is that what do they do with Kirk's contract? Because the real edge that comes with a rookie contract quarterback is the fact that, like, the whole quarterback room is making under $10 million. That's not the case right now with the Vikings, and they do have some tough decisions to make if that's the path they want to go down. But I truly believe, given the rest of the roster, that is the right path.
This might be a hard sort of answer to quantify for you, but as you weigh Kirk Cousins, the quarterback, the next couple of years, especially going into the 2022 year, which right now he's got a $45 million cap hit, and it's second behind Matt Ryan, but he's better than Kellen Mond because Kellen Mond's never played before. Yeah. So how good does Kellen Mond have to be between now and week 1, 2022, if it indeed heads in that direction, relative to the money he makes, though, because his cap hit for next year is going to be like $1.2 million. So the Vikings would save, when you factor in the $10 million in dead cap for Kirk, by switching from Kirk to Kellen Mond in a year from now, the Vikings would save $35 million to the cap, but they'd almost certainly have a worse quarterback unless Mond is just amazing right out of the gate, right? So how do you balance that type of decision as a franchise?
It's a great question. So the Kirk has been, so just to kind of put this on like a scale, like, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes are somewhere in that 3.5 to 4.5 wins above replacement every single year sort of category. And in addition to that, when you look at it from a, like, quarterback isn't one man type of thing, where Russell Wilson makes a ton of money, but he also elevates the play of DK Metcalf, who's drafted very similarly, in the draft to Kellen Mond. It's sort of like you want to look at the teams that do the best job of taking quarterback, wide receiver, running back, O-line, wins above replacement, and how they do per dollar there. And last season, to no one's surprise, Green Bay, Tampa Bay were the most efficient teams in terms of taking, players from those positions and getting war out of them. Now, what the Vikings are going to try to do, by the way, Minnesota 5th, because they got Justin Jefferson on a rookie deal, doing extremely well, and Kirk actually had a really good season last year. The Vikings want to turn this on their head. So let's say Kirk's probably conservatively a 2 to 2.5 win player, right? So you're not talking about an elite guy.
What's Mahomes for context?
So Mahomes is on average over the past 3 years about a 3.5 win player. At his peak, he's 4.5. Mm-hmm. He was injured the 1 year last season, kind of right in that upper threes area. Kirk has been with Minnesota anywhere from 2 to 2.5. So you're looking there now. Mond, like, I would say, Mond is probably you could probably earmark him for about a win, right? So you're losing about a win to a 1.5 going from Kirk down to Mond, but you save, as you said, all that money. Kirk's 1.5, Kirk's 2.5 times better, but he's making 35 times as much. Yeah. So that's where the calculus sort of, gets difficult. And in addition, Kirk's never been, although, Jefferson, you could argue, is in that category, but we never think of Kirk as a guy that elevates the play of bad players like B.C. Johnson, or even like underpaid players like Irv Smith, Tajay Sharp. The Vikings don't have to tolerate players like that if Kellen Mond is the quarterback, because they can actually use that money to sign players like, let's say Antonio Brown, or even somebody like Chris Godwin would be in that, one of the underrated things the Chiefs did when Mahomes became their quarterback is they signed Sammy Watkins to a $16 million per year deal to be their third option. Like, you have that luxury when your quarterback doesn't make that much. And even though Sammy didn't become a $16 million player, there was more than enough slack there because Mahomes was making so many wins out of what he was doing.
Also, by the way, then they signed Mahomes to the massive contract and immediately restructure the 2021 year to bring his cap hit to $7 million for this year, so they can sign Joe Thuney to play left guard.
And Orlando Brown eventually as well. Like, again, that's it. That's right. And that's also, by the way, low key why everybody sort of looked at Kirk's deal as being, it's only 3 years, but there's almost no flexibility in that deal. Whereas when you look at Mahomes' deal, it's 10 years. And it's sort of Brady-like in that the years where the Chiefs are doing well money-wise or non-pandemic wise, Mahomes can take his full salary and take the full cap hit. And in years like this year where it's not quite as easy, he can convert, base salary to signing bonus or roster bonuses to signing bonuses and spread that thing out, a la what Brady was always doing for the Patriots. And then they can go fill up. When your quarterback makes sort of that flat rate every year guaranteed, you don't have that flexibility. And frankly, Kirk shouldn't give that flexibility to the Vikings. He's an employee of them. There's a mercenariness to Kirk that is, I think, rational, frankly. But and that's the calculus with Mond is when the Vikings go to him, they will have the resources to surround him with great talent, both on offense and on defense. And that is something that they have not been able to do. They haven't been able to. It's not that they can't do nothing, but they can't do everything for him the way that teams were able to do everything for Jared Goff and Carson Wentz when they were young players. Funny, they made the Super Bowl on their rookie deal, not so much when they were on their veteran deal. And the Vikings, I think their fans will sort of like that freedom to be able to acquire top end talent or keep top end talent like Jefferson with a quarterback like Mond making what he's making.
So what's the progression here then? Because Kirk is going to start in 21. Do you, if the Vikings were to call you and consult with you on this, is the natural, most logical progression to take the last year of Kirk's contract, which is fully guaranteed but can be traded? And I believe if you trade him in March of next year, you take a $10 million cap hit, but you save $35 million to the cap. Is the hope that you're in a position to trade him potentially next March and put Mond in as your starter in 22, which then clearly would free you up when free agency starts in March of 2022 to begin making the type of moves that you're talking about here, Eric?
Yeah, your best case scenario is what the Chiefs ended up being able to do. Alex Smith led the league in passing. In 2017, they were able to get a third rounder, Kendall Fuller, who played a big part in their Super Bowl. And to your point, Judd, most importantly, the cap space. There are teams now, Denver, for example, if they strike out on Aaron Rodgers, that's a really good roster that just needs a quarterback to contend in the AFC West. Washington, I mean, you could trade Kirk back to Washington. That's another team that is actually building something great, but doesn't have the quarterback to sort of go with it. Next year's quarterback class, now we say this every year, and then guys like Zach Wilson or Joe Burrow hit, but like next year's class doesn't look like a 5 quarterback class. So there might be some team that's super desperate, and they should, frankly, given everything, they should be ready to do what the Philadelphia Eagles did to Minnesota in 2016. If a team, sort of is desperate, that somebody gets injured, they're on the precipice of competing, and they hit the panic button. The Vikings should be willing to flip Kirk now. I mean, the fact of the matter is their Vegas win total is 8.5. They're 33-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're not a Super Bowl contender this year. If the opportunity comes to fortify the future via a Cousins trade at any time from now until next offseason, they should take it and then incur the costs associated with it.
Eric, what are some other draft picks that stood out to you one way or the other? I'll throw just a couple anecdotes. So Wyatt Davis so they picked him 86th, and you guys had him as the 61st best player on the big board. Consensus, all of the big boards, consensus had him 53rd. So that looks like a value pick. What about Wyatt Davis, and what other pick stood out to you?
Well, the trade with the Jets was a home run. We haven't talked about Fields yet. I think the Vikings should have been more aggressive trying to get Fields. It's clear that there was the opportunity to do so. But like assuming that wasn't possible, the trade with the Jets was a really good trade. They got a ton of value there. We computed about a quarter of a win above replacement over the course of the deals, which is really hard to do if it's a non-quarterback. So that's a very good trade. They got value there with Darrisaw, who is a top 15 pick by consensus. They got him at 23. Davis, as you said, a great pick. The Mond pick, I think, has good value. Kenny Nwangu, a very good athlete at the running back position, almost no carries, though. And you wonder sort of now, is that backfield too crowded for he, Madison, and Cook? The ones that always kind of make me scratch my head is the fact that during the course of the Zimmer era, the Vikings have only used one second-round pick or earlier on a defensive lineman, and that was Yannick Ngakoue. They've never, and this list is long, and, Vikings fans are quick to point out the hits, but you're looking at Shamar Steffens, Scott Crichton, B.J. Dubose, Donnell Hunter, Stephen Weatherly, Afadi Adedebo, Jaleel John. Like, these guys are all bad players except for Donnell Hunter. Ade Aruna, Jalen Holmes, Armin Watts, Kenny Willekes. And, it is a solved question that to get elite edge play, it is important to draft those guys early because they're the easiest to project. Like they're the position that we have nailed, and the Vikings seem to think that they're the one team that can get defensive line help later. And everybody, they've had a great defense, but it was on the backs of players that Zimmer didn't draft or develop. The Everson Griffin or the Linval Joseph, Tom Johnson. Once all those guys left, what did we see last year? It was a bunch of guys that Zimmer and Patterson stuck their neck out for, and they couldn't even get within 5 feet of the quarterback. So I get worried that they haven't learned necessarily from that experience.
Mac Jones, do you like him, and did the Vikings possibly make a mistake by making the trade with the Jets to pass on Mac Jones?
I like Mac Jones as a value from 10 on. So I thought the Vikings probably I would have taken him if I was Minnesota. I would have traded up for Fields if I was Minnesota. I think Jones is a good prospect. I think the New England got great value for him at 15. I can see why the Vikings didn't do it because Mond, the difference between he and Mond is not that huge. And given the bounty they got for that pick, it makes some sense to me. But I'm almost always going to take the quarterback with my natural pick. If I'm anywhere, if I'm outside of the basin of Rodgers, Mahomes, Wilson, like I'm always going to do that because that guy, like if he ends up being Kirk Cousins on, 1/3 of the salary or even less in the case of pick 13 or 14, then you're doing amazingly there. And I just don't know. I do think a first-round pick is more in your face to Cousins, and we have yet to see him, have a backup quarterback that wasn't of like the Trevor Siemian ilk. So who knows, like what it's going to be like in 2021, now that he has a competition. But I would have considered Jones if I was Minnesota.
Yeah, that's Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. Great stuff, man. It's been fun following your coverage, and just like on a personal note, it's really cool to see you dominating and hosting the PFF Forecast podcast, and you up on the big set, man. We enjoy watching your career play out.
Well, I appreciate that, and it was it was only like a few years ago I was calling into Mackie and Judd with my my tinfoil hat predictions of the Vikings, but it's fun to just hang out and talk football with you guys.
Yep, and now you get
Awesome
to put your
stuff.
tinfoil hat on and get paid to do it, so it's great.
That's right.
Yep.
All right, Eric, we'll talk again soon, man. Appreciate it. All right, Eric Eager from PFF. And real quick, before we react to some really interesting things in there, let's react in a second. A shout out and a thank you to Federated Insurance for helping us push forward with both Mackie and Judd and Purple Daily, and for helping business owners in the state of Minnesota for over 100 years. They're one of us. They're based in Owatonna, and they measure the success of their business by the success of yours. They partner with you. They help protect your business, help you sleep better at night. You can find all kinds of resources, and you can find out about MyShield and how MyShield can help your business at federatedinsurance.com. And remember, at Federated, it's our business to protect yours. Eric gave me a good question point there. And
I
so
thought you'd stop the show for that and tell him.
Nah, he was on a roll.
He was on a roll. Yeah.
I didn't
Fill
want to
him
derail
in.
him.
Yeah.
No, he
You would've
knows.
enjoyed it.
He knows. So I now have 27 good questions or good points on the season. You have 25. Declan has 1. So we'll keep those going here. I'm going to keep probably extending my lead over you guys. I let you guys get a little too close. I'm going to come up with some better questions going forward.
Let's get Gerson on again. I'll talk to Gerson right before we start.
I don't know. He's given Mackey a good question, Judd a good question. I think I got to sneak in that Jada McDaniels one right at the start of it.
Well, you did it. You did that last time, but you'd already awarded me the good question. Yeah.
No, he wanted to.
No, I mean, you got your the Jada McDaniel stuff is old now, man. Now you got to move on from Jada McDaniel.
We talked about it. It's fine.
What did you make of the idea? So when the Vikings were desperate, Teddy Bridgewater went down with a knee injury at the end of training camp, and they were like, "We think we can win now, but we need a new starting quarterback." And they called the Eagles, and the Eagles were not quite as hooked on Sam Bradford as the Vikings are with Kirk, because Kirk's been good for the Vikings. Bradford had some flashes, but I think they had Foles and Bradford. It was before they drafted Wentz, right? Would you, if a team went down with an ACL, would you? I draw the line there. Like, I'm not trading Kirk between now and the start of the season unless somebody says we'll give you literally anything you want. Well, because I think the Vikings can. I think they can win more than 8.5. Vegas has them as a non-playoff team. I think they're a playoff team personally. But what did you make of that notion?
It's intriguing, but so the Vikings don't see their chances for 2021 like the odds makers do. So they see themselves as a playoff team, no question. They might be wrong. They might be entirely wrong.
Vegas builds a lot of buildings off of being right. You know?
Right. But I'm saying it doesn't. They might be right, but it's what the Vikings think for their own sake that's important here. And I think that the Vikings think that they are a playoff team. And you know what? With all the stuff that's transpiring in Green Bay, they might be exactly right. Here's where I wouldn't trade Kirk now is the idea that they have in drafting Mond is exactly right. Mm-hmm. So I have no interest in him starting week one. If he doesn't play all of 2021 in a regular season game, I'm happier. So, I like what they're doing here. I see the plan here. And the plan is not, okay, look pretty good in training camp. Let's bail on Kirk. Let's trade Kirk if we possibly can. The plan is to sit him. See, the threat to Kirk, that's the intriguing thing about the entire scenario. The threat to Kirk is not immediate. The threat to Kirk is not week 3 of 2021. What you're trying to do here, and what I like, and because he's a third-round pick, I believe you have time to do this, is develop Kellen Mond into a guy that when he's set to pop, can step in, and that's not the old Christian Ponder was a first-round pick, and McNabb is struggling. So at halftime of a Monday night game in Chicago, we're just going to switch quarterbacks. That's not the plan here. So, no, I think the Vikings are, with the road that they have picked, I think it's very smart to stand pat, have Kirk start in 2021 unless he gets hurt, and to give Mond the year to develop, and then to really aggressively explore trading Kirk after this coming season to make, if Mond is set to play, to make the transition to Mond, as we've been talking about, in 2022.
Yep, I'll stand by what I said a couple days ago. I really feel strongly that the drafting of Kellen Mond and the current contract status of Kirk means that Kirk will be traded in February or March, maybe April of next year, and Kellen Mond is the starting quarterback, unless there's a bunch of red flags behind the scenes or something that are unforeseen. But, if I'm Spielman, and maybe this conversation has taken place, I'm going maybe even behind the scenes, maybe just a private conversation with Kellen Mond and his agent, and I'm saying, guys, can't promise anything, but prepare for the next 12 months like you are going to be the starting quarterback going into camp in 2022. Prepare mentally, learn how to study film, figure out how to make those throws outside the hash marks that you struggled with in college. Those are the things that we need you to work on to maybe be the starting quarterback in a year from now. And, with Kirk, it wouldn't be as much about him having a train wreck season. It literally is that calculus equation that we talked to Eric about, which is, if you have a good, not great quarterback making $45 million to the cap on a $200 million cap or whatever it's going to be next year, it is virtually and historically impossible to build a true Super Bowl roster. It's just a fact. There's no quarterback or no roster example that says, here's a good quarterback making great money and they won a Super Bowl. It doesn't happen. So if that contract is checkmate still going into 2020, now you could restructure and you could extend him into his age 35 season. You restructure, bring that cap hit down, give him some guarantee money at age 35. But when you do that, you're basically negating the value of Kellen Mond's contract. If you're going to use Kellen Mond, you want to do it starting in 2022. So you have 3 years of a $1 million cap hit to build a roster around him.
Going inside the mind of Kirk, though, I don't think that Kirk, now that Mond has been picked, I think Kirk is going to be bound and determined to get his next payday probably elsewhere. I think Kirk loves to feel loved. Kirk loves to feel appreciated, and Kirk loves to get paid. Eric hit on something that probably should be a reason for Vikings fans to root for Rodgers not to go to the Broncos, and that's this. It would be an ideal fit to work out a trade that would involve the Cousins camp and the Vikings, okay? To trade Kirk after 2021 to Denver. George Payton, Kirk, I love you. Always, I helped sign you in Minnesota. I love you. I love you. I love you. I'd like to give you a contract extension because his 2022 contract cripples any team. Like, it's ridiculous. It's the type of contract that was never meant to be played on. But in Kirk's case, he might try, which is a mistake. But if the Broncos and George Payton can say, we value you and we would like to give you 3 more years on top of that, and by the way, smooth out all of the problems that exist with the financial implications for 2022, I think that's your best bet. I really do. And then you know what? You take a 3rd round pick and you move on with life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That was great stuff from Eric. You can find him as part of the PFF Forecast podcast as well. And tomorrow, write that down, predictions, and an accountability session that is sure to be jam-packed after emerging from draft weekend. So some completion percentages are going to change.
I don't track this.
Oh, no, but I thought you knew. Sometimes you've got a gut feel for it.
No, that's Mackey and Judd. I thump my chest on Mackey and Judd. I do not thump my chest on this show.
You just said oof, like you knew.
I just know it's going to be a lot of work because there has to be 50
you don't track it. What do you care?
Predictions or so.
Phil does it.
I'll be pouring a cocktail and tracking all of our.
Hey, don't be drinking too much. Tonight. I don't want any screw ups here. Very important. I keep my lead if possible.
All right, that's a wrap on today's episode of Purple Daily. Another deep dive into just an interesting 12 months at the Vikings quarterback position. And it could just be a lot of good news if all things go right on all fronts. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Daily Vikings entertainment here on Purple Daily.